Do you know that Mark Jackson "What Happened to the Game I Love" meme? Well, I think that meme is a perfect metaphor for the Nadal-Federer debate. Because back in the day, that used to be the debate. 10 years ago, Nadal versus Federer, who's the greatest tennis player of all time and who's going to be the greatest tennis player of all time. Because if you remember, back then Federer had all the allocates, all the numbers, all the stats, but Nadal was catching up at a great rate of knots, and Nadal was getting better on every surface, and it seemed like at some point Nadal might catch him. And that was the debate. And fast forward 2023, 2024, it is basically Novak who has 99% of the stats. Novak who is the GOAT if you look at it objectively. And then you have kind of the guys who do not want to admit that, and they're just trying to dig up some stats. They're bringing up Olympic games, and they're bringing up like random, well, Nadal made 21 season quarterfinal, whatever the hell type of arguments. I don't even know. And they're also bringing up stuff like Novak is faking injuries, he has easy opponents, and so on and so forth. So, the debate kind of got ugly in a way. And the great debate between Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, even as a Novak fan, I mean, that's a great debate, just completely got ignored. So, what I used to think about that debate is that Rafael Nadal is a undisputedly better tennis player than Roger Federer. I was really like pro Rafa in that debate. So the way I viewed the GOAT race is Novak is here, Rafa is just, a little bit under it. Then Roger's actually a bit significantly under Rafa. So the biggest gap in my opinion, in the big three was between Rafa and Roger, between number 2 and number 3. That's how I used to view it. But I kind of view it differently now when I actually start to think about it. Because yes, Rafa has the majority of the stats right now over Roger, and he's going to have it because, of course, Roger is retired. So he has the head-to-head record, the most lopsided, that's what I wanted to say, the most lopsided head-to-head record in the big three, between the big three. He has 2 more Grand Slams, he has 8 more Masterses, he has a higher career winning percentage, he's more dominant on his favorite surface, and of course he's more clutch than Roger. So my favorite stat used to be, when I tried to explain my view on the big three, is the blown match points. Novak had 3 matches in which he blew a match point. Nadal had 8. And I think Roger had either 24 or 28. I don't remember. And it's funny how I bring up this argument because 2 months ago, Novak blew a match in which he had 3 match points. And a couple of days ago, Rafa did the same. So it's kind of weird to bring up that argument. But I thought that was the perfect example of those two are kind of significantly mentally tougher than Roger Federer. And Novak is a bit mentally tougher than Rafael Nadal. So I think that was my argument. And, one of my argument used to be that, this was kind of to piss off maybe Roger fans, that kind of post-2010 Australian Open Roger Federer is basically just Andy Murray. If you compare post-2010 Australian Open until the end of his career, 2000, you can bring up 2021, but basically 2019 is what I'm trying to say, or 2020, early 2020, you'll basically have the exact same stats as Andy Murray from 2008 to 2016 or early 17. I think he would have 1 more major, less Masters tournaments, and a couple of weeks less at number 1. So that's kind of weird. So you basically have the GOAT of the GOATs first part of the career, but the second part of the career with Roger is kind of just like Andy Murray. And also one more pro Rafa stat is that by 2009, Rafa actually had more Masters tournaments than Roger Federer. So he had more Masters tournaments at age 23 than the guy who just broke Pete Sampras' all-time Grand Slam record, which is actually mind-blowing to think about. So Rafa, he had a really early peak, especially on clay. So, there is plenty of arguments to make for Rafa. But it's funny how I actually started being pro-Roger. Not pro-Roger, but kind of neutral in this argument. I actually started thinking about ifs. I started to think like a Nadal fan, because Nadal fans keep talking about like ifs. If there was more clay tournaments, if, I don't know, he doesn't get injured, if this, if that. So I started thinking about, well, what if there was more grass tournaments? Like, we all know the schedule. We all know the schedule. The great thing about tennis, like everybody knows the schedule because it's the same. Every year is the same. You have 9 Masters and you have 4 Grand Slams and you have the indoor ATP finals. And it's always the same. It's the same surface. It's the same schedule. So if you grow up, if you're a 10-year-old, you're trying to practice, you will know that in 10 years of time, you'll get this schedule. And it's not like you cannot adjust because Rafa is naturally not a lefty. And he learned to be a lefty because he wanted to get an edge over certain guys. So you can adjust your style of play to a certain style, to a certain court, to a certain surface, to anything basically. And what if, I mean, they are saying like, what if there are 2 clay Grand Slams? What if the ATP finals is on clay? Well, what if you have a Masters or 2 Masters, even 3 Masters tournaments on grass? What if you have 2 majors on grass? What if the season-ending tournaments on grass? Well, Roger would have certainly more Grand Slams, more Masters, and more weeks at number 1. So that's kind of interesting. And of course, the big statistical argument for Roger is that he has more weeks at number 1, and his longest consecutive stretch of 237 weeks at number 1 is actually more than Rafa's all-time record of 209. So that's a great thing. And also the ATP finals. So the Rafael Nadal fans keep bringing up the Olympic Games, like he won the Olympic gold medal. But then he didn't win the ATP finals, which is the most neutral thing in tennis because it's best of 3 and hard. The most neutral, most common tournament ever created in tennis. Best of 3 hard. And he has 0. Federer has 6. So that's kind of weird. And also you play the best of the best. And we love to say that Nadal vultures certain tournaments. And then when you think about it, well, I mean, you have the top 8 players there every year and he never won that tournament. So that kind of makes sense. So there is a couple of things that you can argue from Roger. And of course, I actually remembered that I made a video. I made a couple of videos actually. I combined everything. I made a video on what if Novak Djokovic doesn't exist? How would the Grand Slam race look between Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer? And I think the outcome was, and this was back in 2021 when Rafa had 20 slams. So it was 2020. The start was 2020. And I think, well, of course, it's kind of like stupid to think about it, but because certain things, of course, change and blah, blah, blah. But the outcome was 28 for Roger, 24 for Rafa. And I think that's kind of true because Novak did cost Roger a lot more than he cost Rafa. I think Rafa really maximized out his 22 Grand Slams. Because yes, of course, he had a couple of heartbreaking losses. 2012 Australian Open, for example. But he won mostly everything that he could have won. He's kind of like the Michael Jordan of tennis. Like Michael Jordan won 6 finals out of 6 finals. But he also had a couple of round 1 losses. And it's like, what is better, to win 6 out of 6 or to be there like, I don't know, like Tom Brady all the time? Like Tom Brady lost 3 Super Bowls, but he was there all the time. He was there into the semifinal, into the Super Bowl all the time, every single year. So I think that's maybe even slightly better because you always give yourself a chance. You're going to lose eventually, but you're always there. So what I wanted to say that Roger, in my imaginary scenario, won 28 Grand Slams without Novak existing, and Nadal won only 24. Now, of course, that's subject to change. And I actually made a video on what if Rafael Nadal doesn't exist? How many Grand Slams would Roger win? I don't remember the exact score, but I remember I ran into this problem. And that problem was, well, Roger didn't lose to anybody from 2005 Australian Open to 2008 Australian Open. So I think it was basically impossible that Roger would win 12 Grand Slams in a row. So I picked the 2006 French Open, him to lose against Ivan Ljubicic, which I guess pissed off a lot of Roger fans. But my argument was, like, there is no way that he would win 12 Grand Slams in a row. He would actually lose. I mean, he would have to lose to somebody. Or he would actually just be like, okay, I'm done. I won everything. I retire. So, it's a different thing. But what I'm trying to say here is that, for example, let's take 2017, the Renaissance season. Well, Roger won 2 Grand Slams. He won 3 Masters tournaments. And, everybody talks about that season, how great it was, Roger, blah, blah, blah. But that season was only great because Novak wasn't there. I think that's the same Roger as in 2015. And if you look at statistically and you look at the way he played, well, it is the same player. He just ran into prime Novak Djokovic in every final. He also played two finals in 2015, but he lost both because Novak was on GOAT level. He lost two Masters finals to Novak. He actually beat him once that year, and he lost the ATP finals to Novak. Guess what? And then you fast forward to 2017, early 2018. You look at the guys who's beating. He's beating Raonic. He's beating Cilic. He's beating these guys. He also beat Nadal, who's post 2013 outside of clay is not the same player. And he's beating these Ichich guys, but it's not Djokovic. It's not the main guy. And of course he's going to win. And that's the thing with Roger. He was unfortunate to run into Novak so many times. Let's say Australian Open semifinals. It's kind of weird that Novak always plays or always played Murray in the final and Federer in the semifinal, and he always beat them. So it's like Roger is really unfortunate in some of these things. And of course the match point stuff. Look, man, we as Novak fans love to bring that up. It's just so epic. It's beyond epic. But if you're being objective, and Novak pretty much said this, like it's really just 1 point. I mean, he could have served an ace. He really could have served an ace. So I mean, he was there to win 21, 22 or even more than that. So I mean, you have a couple of decent arguments. You really have a couple of decent arguments for Roger Federer here. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section what do you think. Right now, I'm really kind of 50-50-ish. I tend to give Nadal a slight of advantage simply because of the competitive standpoint, of the competitive mindset, and simply because I do not like that Roger just completely ignored the clay season. I mean, when did he start doing that in like 2016, 2017? He wasn't that old. He was 34, 35, saying that, well, I don't care about clay season anymore. So that's, kind of weak. But then again, Rafa is kind of doing that without doing that. He's just, he's just kind of there doing warm-up tournaments and then, okay, I'm pulling out because, I have a minor injury. It's not like he's faking or anything, but we all know that Nadal is focusing on Roland Garros and everything else is a bonus. He's just not admitting it. So, I mean, you can go back and forth. So let me know in the comment section what do you think about this argument. And yeah, that's pretty much it.